Picture this. You're sitting on your couch, and it is Sunday afternoon.
Yeah, the classic Sunday setup.
Right, exactly. The sun is just starting to dip a little lower in the sky, casting those long golden shadows across the floor.
And you've had a genuinely great weekend up to this point.
Exactly. Maybe you saw friends, or maybe you just caught up on some much-needed sleep. But right around 4 or 5 o'clock, the light changes.
It always hits right at that golden hour.
It really does. The weekend starts to fade, and suddenly this very specific, creeping sense of dread just washes over you.
Your stomach tightens just a fraction.
Yeah, and your brain starts running through this mental checklist of, emails you didn't answer on Friday.
Even though you haven't even had dinner yet.
Right. You haven't eaten dinner, and already your weekend feels like it is entirely over. You are physically safe on your couch, but biologically, your body is preparing for a threat.
Which is such a wild biological response.
It's crazy. Why do we experience this specific flavor of anxiety so reliably that we've actually, invented a catchy, slightly absurd phrase just to describe it?
Well, it is one of the most revealing questions we can really ask about modern life. I mean, that physiological shift you were describing.
Okay, that tight stomach and all that.
Exactly. The tightening stomach, the sudden inability to just sit still and enjoy the remaining hours of your weekend. That isn't just a quirk of scheduling.
Right, something deeper.
Much deeper. It is a profound indicator of how our minds operate when we are trapped in a state of chronic anticipatory stress.
Anticipatory stress.
Yeah, because the environment demands we constantly anticipate the future, which completely hijacks our ability to exist in the present.
And that psychological hijacking is exactly what we are getting into today. We've got a really fascinating stack of source material for this deep dive.
We really do.
Yeah, and on the surface, it looks pretty straightforward. It's a series of educational dialogues originally designed to teach C2 level native-sounding American English vocabulary.
Which sounds like a standard language lesson.
Right, but it's not just a random assortment of words. This entire curriculum is intensely focused on the lexicon of corporate culture, burnout, and career trajectories.
It's incredibly specific.
So we are going to use these vocabulary lessons as a sociological mirror.
Which is, frankly, the perfect way to use them. Just to outline our mission for you today, we are looking right past the literal definition.
I'm going way beyond the dictionary here.
Exactly. We are taking an anthropological dive into the modern American workplace. By dissecting these highly evocative idioms, we are going to decode the underlying societal beliefs around success.
And the toll it takes on us.
Right. We are going to examine the psychological and biological toll of chronic overwork. And perhaps most crucially, we will explore the massive paradigm shift that is currently transforming how an entire generation views their relationship with their jobs.
Okay, let's unpack this, because if we really want to understand the modern workplace rebellion that's happening all around us, we have to establish the baseline.
We need to know where we're starting from.
Yeah, we have to understand the emotional starting line of the modern worker. And that begins with how the work week manages to violently bleed into our days off.
Which takes us right back to the couch on Sunday.
Exactly. Let's go back to that Sunday afternoon feeling. The phrase from the materials that perfectly captures this phenomenon is the Sunday scaries.
The Sunday scaries. It's such a quintessentially American colloquialism.
It really is.
We are talking about that creeping sense of anxiety and dread that washes over you, specifically when the realization hits that the weekend is effectively over.
And Monday morning is looming right there.
Right. But what requires deeper analysis here is the cognitive dissonance embedded in the phrase itself. Think about the word scaries.
Yeah, it's almost funny when you think about it.
It is a regressive, almost infantile playground term for fear. It's what a toddler calls the monster under the bed.
Right. And yet it's being used earnestly by 35-year-old middle managers facing a Monday morning marketing meeting. It feels deeply weird that adults have adopted toddler vocabulary to describe their professional lives.
It does feel weird, but it makes perfect sense when you look at the mechanism of anxiety. This level of dread is so primal that it regresses us.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, when you are facing an overwhelming, uncontrollable system like a modern corporate structure, you feel as powerless as a child in the dark.
That is a terrifying image, but it's spot on.
And there is a specific scenario provided in these dialogues that illustrates this perfectly. An individual states, I couldn't even enjoy my dinner because I was plagued by the Sunday scaries.
Plagued by them.
Yes, think about the biological reality of that statement. The anxiety of an event that does not currently exist Monday morning is so potent that it completely overrides the present physical sensory experience of eating a meal.
So the future threat is actively erasing the present reality.
That's exactly what's happening.
That's the ultimate form of anticipatory anxiety. I mean, it's like paying massive interest on a loan you haven't even taken out yet.
That's a great way to put it.
Right. Your brain is preemptively dumping cortisol into your bloodstream to deal with an email that hasn't even been sent. You are sitting at a beautifully set dinner table, but neurologically, you are already dodging traffic on the commute.
That is the exact mechanism. Your nervous system literally cannot tell the difference between an immediate physical threat and an impending social or professional threat.
So it reacts exactly the same way.
Yes, you are burning energy to fight a ghost.
And what exactly is that ghost? Like, what is the reality waiting on Monday that triggers such a profound physiological reaction?
Well, that brings us to the next key phrase in this lexicon, which is the daily grind.
The daily grind.
Yeah.
We use this constantly to describe the repetitive, exhausting routine of daily work.
Ubiquitously.
Yeah, the classic example from the source is someone returning from a trip and sighing, after a 2-week vacation, it was tough getting back to the daily grind.
A very relatable feeling for a lot of people.
Totally relatable. But I have to stop you there and push back on this a little bit.
Okay, go for it.
Because calling all routine a grind feels a bit dramatic to me. I mean, humans actually crave routine, right?
We do, biologically.
Yeah, our circadian rhythms rely on it. Children thrive on it. Are we just pathologizing normal, everyday structure because we'd rather be on vacation?
That's a really fair question. It sounds like we are pathologizing routine until you look closer at the specific linguistic choice of the word grind.
Okay, let's look at the word itself.
The vocabulary doesn't use words like rhythm or flow or cycle. It explicitly uses grind.
Right. Those other words sound much more pleasant.
Exactly. When you think about the physical mechanism of grinding, whether it's grinding coffee beans or a millstone or two tectonic plates, what is the primary physical characteristic?
Well, it's friction. Total destructive friction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It implies a harsh, constant, abrasive rubbing that wears down whatever is caught in the middle,
Ouch.
right? The phrase daily grind suggests that the routine of work isn't just a schedule. It is an environment of constant friction that slowly erodes your energy.
It erodes your spirit.
Your spirit, your autonomy, day by day, layer by layer.
So it's not just a schedule, it's a schedule with teeth.
Yes. It is a mechanical term applied to a biological organism. A machine grinds. A millstone grinds.
But people aren't supposed to grind.
No, they aren't. When we casually call our careers a daily grind, we are subconsciously acknowledging that we are placing ourselves into an industrial mechanism that slowly reduces us to a fine powder.
Wow.
That friction is why the Sunday scaries exist. You aren't dreading waking up at 7 a.m. You are dreading being put back into the millstone.
That is deeply unsettling, but I mean, it explains the biology perfectly. The body knows it's about to be abraded, so it just panics.
It's a very logical, protective response.
Which naturally brings up the massive, glaring question hovering over all of this.
I think I know where you're going with this.
Right. If the daily routine is grinding us down to the point where we are experiencing genuine dinner-ruining panic on a Sunday afternoon, why do we do it?
The big why.
Yeah. Why do we voluntarily walk back to the millstone every single Monday morning without fail?
Yeah.
I mean, we aren't legally forced to do this.
No, we aren't. To understand the compliance, we have to look at the ideology driving the behavior.
Okay.
People don't just subject themselves to a millstone without a compelling narrative that tells them it's the right thing to do.
There has to be a story we tell ourselves.
Exactly. And in the modern professional landscape, that narrative is defined by hustle culture.
Hustle culture. This is where the vocabulary gets intensely ideological.
Very much so.
This isn't just about having a strong work ethic. It is framed as a ubiquitous, almost pernicious societal belief.
Those are the exact words from the source material.
Yeah, it's the idea that success requires relentless, around-the-clock work. It is the absolute glorification of overworking.
Notice the weight of the word ubiquitous. It means it is inescapable.
It's everywhere.
It permeates our media, our social networks, the way we speak to our children about their grades, the podcasts we listen to about self-improvement.
It's in the water supply at this point.
It really is. And it is pernicious because it causes immense psychological and societal harm, but does so subtly. masking itself as a virtue.
That's the insidious part.
Right. The glorification of overworking is so deeply ingrained in the American ethos that it has been elevated to a moral imperative.
Meaning, if you aren't doing it, you're bad.
Exactly. If you are not hustling, you are not just lazy, you are morally deficient.
That's heavy. Let's break down the actual practical mechanics of the hustle because the requirements are honestly wild.
They are completely unrealistic.
Yeah, you cannot simply work your standard 9-to-5 job. That is considered the absolute bare minimum, almost like a sign of stagnation.
Like you're failing if you just do your job.
Exactly. To be viewed as successful, you have to execute two incredibly demanding tasks simultaneously. First, you have to climb the corporate ladder, which mandates putting in excruciatingly long hours at your primary job.
Right.
And second, as if that isn't enough, you're expected to maintain a side hustle.
The language here is highly revealing of the psychological trap. Let's look at climbing the corporate ladder first.
Okay, let's dissect the ladder.
A ladder is a vertical, precarious structure. It implies that success is defined entirely by upward mobility.
You can't just move sideways.
No. And upward mobility requires constant physical exertion against gravity. You have to pull your own weight, step by agonizing step.
Which is exhausting.
Very. And if you stop actively climbing, you don't just stay put. You are perceived as being in the way of others or at risk of falling.
Oh, that's a great point. You're a roadblock if you stop.
Exactly. The exhaustion is not an unfortunate byproduct of the climb. The exhaustion is the proof that you are climbing.
So being tired becomes a badge of honor.
Precisely.
And then there's the side hustle. I find the branding of this phrase completely fascinating.
It's a masterpiece of modern marketing.
It really is. Look at how this term actively reframes exhaustion and economic anxiety as ambition. The phrase side hustle sounds dynamic.
It sounds cool.
Right, it sounds proactive, entrepreneurial, and energetic.
Yeah.
But if we strip away the clever Silicon Valley marketing paint, what does it actually mean?
It means working a second job.
Yes.
Yeah.
It's a linguistic sleight of hand. It masks the grim reality that people are either working a second job because their primary 40-hour work week doesn't pay a livable wage,
Which is incredibly common.
or because the societal pressure to constantly monetize every waking hour is so intense that having a hobby is seen as a waste of time.
That's the really pernicious part of it.
We don't say, I have to work a second job because rent is too high,
Right.
or I'm pathologically incapable of resting. We say, I'm focusing on my side hustle.
It sanitizes the sheer exhaustion of it all.
It really does. It makes it sound empowering instead of desperate.
What's fascinating here is how early this conditioning begins. This ideology isn't something you are handed on your first day of orientation at a corporate job.
No, you already know it by then.
Exactly. It is a cultural indoctrination that begins in childhood. We teach children that their worth is directly tied to their productivity.
Idle time is wasted time.
That's the message. You need extracurriculars, you need advanced placement classes, you need to be constantly optimizing your resume before you even have a driver's license.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
By the time an individual enters the workforce, they have fully internalized the belief that if they are not exhausted, they are not contributing.
So the hustle ceases to be an activity. It becomes their entire identity,
That's exactly what happens.
which is a terrifying foundation to build a human life on, because human beings are biological organisms.
They're not machines.
Right. We are not perpetual motion machines. And that brings us to the inevitable climax of this entire cultural setup,
The crash.
the crash. When humans operate under these relentless demands of hustle culture indefinitely, when they are constantly grinding, constantly climbing, constantly monetizing their weekends, the biological reality and the financial demands inevitably violently collide.
They absolutely do. The human nervous system simply cannot sustain infinite output.
It's physically impossible.
And there is a very visceral idiom used to describe this exact state of systemic biological failure.
Which is?
When the ambition outpaces the organism's capacity, the result is chronic burnout, perfectly captured by the phrase running on fumes.
Running on fumes. Let's dissect the physical origin of this metaphor, because it paints a really stark picture of what is happening inside the body.
It's a very industrial metaphor again.
Exactly. It comes from the mechanics of a combustion engine. You are driving a car, the gas tank is practically empty, and the needle has been pinned on E for 50 miles.
It's completely dry.
There is absolutely no liquid gasoline left in the tank. The engine is pulling the last vaporized remnants of fuel, the literal fumes, just to keep the pistons firing for a few more desperate seconds.
The engine is on the verge of a catastrophic stall.
And when we apply that mechanical reality to a human being, it perfectly describes end-stage burnout.
It really does. A person who is running on fumes is in a state of utter cellular exhaustion.
They have completely depleted their natural energy reserves.
At this point, they are operating purely on stress hormones.
Adrenaline and cortisol.
Exactly. And usually masking the deficit with massive amounts of caffeine. There's an example in the materials that highlights this perfectly.
Oh yeah, what was it?
The sentence is, by the time we launched the software, the entire development team was running on fumes.
Let's talk about the biological cost of that scenario. Adrenaline is a survival hormone.
It is not meant for daily use.
Right. It evolved to help you outrun a predator in a short, intense burst of 2 or 3 minutes. It is a temporary emergency override.
Just to keep you alive.
Exactly. It is not designed to fuel a 6-month software development cycle.
No, it is decidedly not.
When you are running on fumes, your body believes it is in a constant state of mortal danger, but your brain is trying to write Python code or balance a Q3 spreadsheet.
It is a catastrophic disconnect.
It really is. A disconnect between what your biology demands, immediate rest and recovery, and what the corporate environment demands. Relentless, uninterrupted output.
It is a state of severe physiological deficit. You have emptied your energetic bank account, and you are now operating on high-interest biological credit.
High-interest biological credit. I love that phrasing.
And the insidious thing about biological credit is that the debt always comes due.
How does that usually look?
Usually in the form of severe physical illness, panic attacks, or major depressive episodes. The body simply shuts down.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, this raises a deeply confounding question for me.
What's that?
Well, when you are driving a physical car and it starts running on fumes, the logical, instinctual action is to pull over.
Right. You stop driving.
You stop the car, you get out, and you find a gas station. Why don't the people in these high-pressure burnout factories just stop the car?
Here's where it gets really interesting. That is the million-dollar paradox.
Right. If you are quite literally destroying your mental and physical health, if you were sitting there on a Sunday evening paralyzed by dread, why not just walk away?
The answer lies in the most brilliantly insidious concept we are going to talk about today. Golden handcuffs.
Golden handcuffs. Man, I want to spend some time looking at the brilliant contradiction in the phrase itself. Let's pull those two words apart.
Okay, let's do it.
Handcuffs are tools of incarceration.
They're meant to trap you.
They are forged to restrict your movement, to strip you of your autonomy, and to lock you into a position entirely against your will.
Right.
You only put handcuffs on a prisoner, someone who is an active flight risk. But gold is the universal human symbol for ultimate reward.
It signifies wealth, prestige, achievement.
And total freedom.
It is a stunning juxtaposition, isn't it? The phrase forces two completely opposing realities into a single physical object.
It really does.
You are imprisoned, but your prison is constructed from the exact material society has conditioned you to desire most.
So it creates this incredibly complex psychological trap for the employee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
How do you reconcile the daily reality of being fundamentally trapped with this societal perception that you have won?
It creates massive cognitive dissonance. Because the culture tells you that if you have the gold, you should be ecstatic.
You should be the happiest person in the room.
Right. You have the stock options, the prestige, the corner office. So when you wake up on Sunday with the scaries, your primary emotion isn't just dread.
It's guilt.
Yes,
Yeah.
It's guilt. You think, I have absolutely no right to be unhappy. Look at my W-2. People would kill for this job.
Which is exactly how the trap works.
The cuffs are so incredibly bright and shiny that they blind you to the fact that you are chained to a radiator.
And that guilt is a highly effective retention tool. The source materials provide a scenario that illustrates this perfectly.
What's the example?
It says, he despises the corporate culture, but the stock options act as golden handcuffs.
Look at the intensity in the verb despises.
Yes, it isn't a mild frustration.
Right, it is an active, visceral hatred of the environment.
Yet, the financial architecture is so robust, and the promise of future wealth, those unvested options, is so intoxicating that the individual cannot justify the short-term financial loss required to reclaim their long-term autonomy.
The opportunity cost of leaving feels higher than the biological cost of staying.
And so they stay.
They stay running on fumes.
Feeding themselves into the daily grind.
dreading every single Sunday.
It's a vicious, vicious cycle.
But, the laws of physics and biology tell us that something has to give.
Eventually, yes.
You cannot have an entire workforce that is simultaneously biologically depleted, running on fumes, and financially trapped against their will, locked in golden handcuffs, without building up an explosive amount of pressure.
The pressure cooker analogy is very apt here.
And over the last few years, we have seen that tension finally snap. Which brings us to the next massive shift in our deep dive.
The rebellion.
The rebellion.
The pressure cooker has absolutely blown. What we are witnessing is a massive paradigm shift in the workforce.
We're just done with it.
Exactly. Employees are no longer just complaining. They are actively, systematically dismantling the foundational tenets of hustle culture.
And the most prominent, culturally visible manifestation of this rebellion is encapsulated in the phenomenon of quiet quitting.
Quiet quitting. We really need to define this carefully because the media has completely mangled what this term actually means.
They really have. Let's start by clarifying what it is not.
Good place to start.
Quiet quitting does not mean you are secretly resigning from your job. You aren't slipping out the back door, you aren't embezzling office supplies, and you aren't refusing to work.
You are still very much employed and drawing a paycheck.
Precisely. To understand what it is, we have to look at the boundaries being established.
And the boundaries are strict.
Quiet quitting is the deliberate act of establishing stringent, inflexible professional boundaries. It means fulfilling the exact specific duties outlined in your employment contract.
It means doing exactly what you are paid to do. Nothing more and nothing less.
It is the absolute rejection of the unpaid, uncontracted extras. It means if you aren't paid to be on call, there are no unpaid 8:00 p.m. Zoom meetings.
And no answering Slack messages on a Sunday morning.
Right. It is the outright refusal to participate in the performance of going above and beyond.
Which is a huge shift.
But the name itself is what blows my mind. The fact that simply fulfilling the legal requirements of your job description is now classified by management as a form of quitting.
That is the most revealing part of the entire phenomenon.
It's wild.
It exposes how deeply hustle culture had warped the social contract of work. Going above and beyond, sacrificing your evenings, your weekends, your mental health, was no longer viewed as exceptional behavior deserving of exceptional reward.
It was just the baseline.
It had quietly become the baseline expectation just to maintain your current position. By calling it quiet quitting, the corporate structure is admitting that the system relies entirely on the unpaid, boundaryless exploitation of the worker to function.
Right. It's like if I hire a plumber to fix my sink and he fixes the sink and leaves, I don't accuse him of quiet quitting because he didn't stay and organically remodel my entire bathroom for free.
That is a perfect analogy.
But in the corporate world, that's exactly what was expected.
And the primary motivation for this shift is entirely biological. People are doing this to stop the fumes.
They have to, or they'll break.
The materials cite an example that makes this clear. To protect her mental health, Sarah engaged in quiet quitting and started leaving the office precisely at 5 p.m.
Leaving work when the workday legally ends is now a deliberate, named strategy for mental health preservation.
It is a radical act of self-preservation.
But quiet quitting is just the behavioral manifestation of a much deeper philosophical shift, isn't it?
It is. It connects to a broader rejection of what we historically call the rat race.
The rat race. This is the fiercely competitive, exhausting, and often completely pointless struggle for wealth and power within the corporate hierarchy.
It's a maze with no exit.
Right. It is the endless cycle of trying to get ahead, only to find that the finish line keeps being moved further away.
There is a realization happening on a mass scale, beautifully summarized by a concept embedded in these vocabulary lessons.
Oh, I know the quote you're talking about.
The realization is this: winning the rat race still makes you a rat.
I love that quote. It completely destroys the core promise of hustle culture.
It pulls the rug right out from under it.
Hustle culture promises transcendence. It tells you that if you run fast enough, if you climb high enough, if you sacrifice enough of your youth to the daily grind, you will eventually escape the system.
You'll be the boss.
You will become the master of the universe. But the realization driving this paradigm shift is that the maze is a closed loop.
You never actually escape.
You can be the fastest rat. You can be the richest rat with the heaviest golden handcuffs. But you are still just a rodent, trapped in a maze designed and controlled by someone else.
You haven't transcended anything. You've just been given a slightly larger wheel to run on.
So, if we synthesize these behaviors, what we are seeing with quiet quitting is essentially the individual worker making a profound, conscious compromise.
They are negotiating their survival.
They are deciding to stop running the rat race while acknowledging they still need to survive inside the maze.
They still need to eat.
They are essentially saying, I recognize the maze, I need the cheese to pay my mortgage, so I will walk the exact path required to get my daily cheese. But I absolutely refuse to run.
I will not exhaust myself.
I refuse to exhaust my nervous system trying to beat the other rats to a prize that doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
They are unilaterally opting out of the hyper-competition without forfeiting their fundamental livelihood.
It's a brilliant survival strategy within a highly toxic ecosystem. They are prioritizing biological self-preservation over the illusion of eventual victory.
But for some individuals, simply walking the maze instead of running it isn't enough, right?
No, it's not.
Putting up boundaries is a great band-aid, but it doesn't heal the wound. Walking the maze still leaves you inside the maze.
You're still trapped.
The golden handcuffs, even if you try to ignore them at 5:01 p.m., are still physically clamped onto your wrists.
Exactly. Boundary setting is a modification of the current reality, not a departure from it. And that brings us to the final, most dramatic evolution in this workplace narrative.
The big leap.
For some, modification is impossible. They don't just want to walk, they want to locate the exit door and break out of the maze entirely. They want the great escape.
Let's dive into the vocabulary of the exit strategy, because leaving the maze requires an entirely different set of actions.
A completely different mindset.
The lexicon provides two highly evocative phrases for this kind of dramatic departure, making a career pivot and pulling a 180.
Let's define the mechanics of these moves. A career pivot is not a lateral transfer.
It's not just switching desks.
No, it is not moving from the marketing department to the sales department. It is a fundamental structural shift in your professional trajectory.
A total change of scenery.
It means completely changing industries or roles. You are abandoning the specific ladder you have spent years climbing, stepping off it entirely, and finding an entirely new structure to scale.
And pulling a 180 is an even more aggressive maneuver. We use this to describe a complete 180-degree reversal of direction, behavior, or ideology.
It's a sudden, sharp turn.
You are heading due north at 100 miles an hour, and you slam on the brakes and sprint due south.
The examples provided to illustrate these concepts are incredibly vivid because they highlight the extreme friction of these transitions.
What's the first one?
One example discusses a high-powered corporate lawyer leaving a highly lucrative, prestigious firm to open a boutique bakery.
Oh, wow.
Another mentions individuals packing up and moving to Vermont to open a bed and breakfast specifically to escape the rat race.
I want to dwell on that lawyer for a second because that scenario represents the ultimate violent rejection of the golden handcuffs.
It is the ultimate rejection.
Think about the sunk cost involved there.
Yeah.
You have a human being who has likely spent hundreds of thousands of dollars on a law degree.
Not to mention the years of their life.
They have endured the most grueling, abrasive daily grind imaginable to pass the bar and make partner. They have achieved the absolute pinnacle of society's definition of success.
They have the gold.
They have the gold, and they look at it, realize it's a cage, and walk away from all of it to knead dough at 4 a.m.
It's incredible.
That is not just a job change. That is a profound destruction and reconstruction of identity.
It is the ultimate assertion of autonomy over security. But we also see pulling a 180 happen on a macro organizational level as well.
Oh, how so?
The materials also mention a CEO who pulled a 180 on a remote work policy, suddenly demanding everyone return to the physical office.
Oh, right. We've seen a lot of that lately.
This shows that a 180 can be ideological. It's the friction of completely reversing a previously held, highly public stance.
But let's talk about the cost of the Great Escape, because the vocabulary doesn't romanticize this process.
It's not a fairy tale.
No. It makes it very clear that executing a pivot of this magnitude requires immense psychological courage, and it comes with a massive deficit in social capital.
You lose your status.
When you pull a 180 and abandon your previous career, you are effectively wiping the slate clean. You lose the accumulated armor of your past successes.
And the idiom used here perfectly captures this vulnerability.
What is it?
It says you cannot rest on your laurels.
Resting on your laurels. This traces back to ancient Greece, right?
Yes, where victors were crowned with wreaths of laurel leaves.
Right.
To rest on them means to be so satisfied with your past victories that you cease putting in the effort to achieve anything new.
Which is easy to do if you stay put.
Exactly. If you stay in your comfortable, golden handcuffed corporate job, you can survive for years by resting on your laurels.
You have a reputation.
You know the internal politics, you have institutional knowledge, you can just coast.
But when you pivot to that boutique bakery, the flour doesn't care that you used to be a senior partner at a law firm.
The flour does not care at all.
Your past achievements offer absolutely zero protection or momentum in your new reality. The dough still has to be made.
The customers still have to be won over.
You have surrendered the security of your history for the autonomy of your future.
And because you have surrendered that history, you have to adopt an incredibly aggressive forward posture.
You can't just ease into it.
No, you are entering a true sink-or-swim environment. The final idiom we are looking at describes the exact type of kinetic energy required to survive this pivot.
And that is?
You must hit the ground running.
Hit the ground running. I love the physical imagery of this. It means to begin a new venture immediately with 100% maximum enthusiasm, energy, and competence without requiring or expecting any time to adjust.
None at all.
It's like leaping out of a moving vehicle. You leap out of the speeding car of your old life, and your feet better be moving at top speed the exact microsecond they touch the pavement of your new life, or you are going to faceplant.
There is zero grace period. The examples given are highly demanding.
What do they say?
Well, an author wins a major award, a massive laurel to rest on, but refuses to do so, immediately hitting the ground running on her next book.
So the hustle doesn't stop, it just changes form.
Right. Another example is a company that hires a manager who already knows the industry inside and out, specifically so they can hit the ground running on day one.
They need instant results.
When you pull a 180, you have to prove your worth and your competence all over again, instantly.
Which sounds like its own kind of friction.
The friction is immense, but it is a chosen friction, unlike the abrasive, forced friction of the daily grind.
So what does this all mean? We've traced this incredibly complex narrative arc through just a handful of phrases.
A very revealing handful of phrases.
And what it seems to point to is a massive recalculation of risk and reward. People are realizing that the pain of staying in a life that destroys your biology eventually outweighs the terror of starting completely over.
They are waking up to the math.
They are waking up to the fact that the security provided by the golden handcuffs is a lethal illusion if it costs you your nervous system.
It's not worth it.
They're deciding that reclaiming their autonomy, even if it means burning their social capital, even if it means leaping from a moving vehicle and having to hit the ground running in totally unknown territory, is worth infinitely more than winning a rat race that ultimately just leaves them as a very tired rat.
It is a profound historic shift in human values.
It really is.
To synthesize this entire linguistic journey, we have essentially traced the life cycle of modern work through its own vocabulary.
From start to finish.
We began with the biological warning signs, the anticipatory dread of the Sunday scaries, which lead into the abrasive, erosive reality of the daily grind.
No mill still.
We saw how this destructive cycle is culturally fueled and justified by the moral imperatives of hustle culture, which demands we constantly climb and hustle until our biology fails, leaving us running on fumes.
Entrapped.
And we examined how the corporate structure attempts to prevent our escape by locking us in golden handcuffs.
But the narrative doesn't end in defeat. We also mapped the cure.
The rebellion.
We saw the workforce initiating a massive paradigm shift through quiet quitting. The conscious decision to stop running the maze while still taking the cheese.
Setting those boundaries.
And finally, we saw the courageous individuals making the ultimate career pivot, pulling a 180 and escaping the maze entirely, accepting that true freedom requires hitting the ground running.
It is a remarkable story of entrapment and liberation, entirely hidden within the common phrases we use every single day.
It's everywhere once you look for it.
It proves that our relationship with work doesn't just dictate our schedules, it literally shapes the language we use to construct our reality.
And that brings us directly to you, the person listening to this deep dive right now. I want to pass the mirror over to you. We've laid out the entire topographical map of the modern workplace.
So where are you on the map?
Where are you standing right now? Are you battling the Sunday scaries this weekend? Are you currently feeling the cold, heavy weight of the golden handcuffs and trying to convince yourself you like how they look?
A lot of people are.
Are you quietly quitting right now to save your sanity? Or are you secretly, quietly, planning to pull a massive 180 and open that bakery? Take a serious look at your own vocabulary.
Because recognizing the specific words you use to describe your daily reality is the very first step toward having the power to change it.
Absolutely. And as we wrap up, I want to leave you with one final brand new thought to mull over. Take a step back and look at the actual words we've unpacked today.
The actual imagery.
Almost all the vocabulary we've discussed regarding work is framed around heavy machinery, survival instincts, and literal entrapment.
It's very bleak.
We are talking about grinding stones, running on fumes, handcuffs, rats trapped in a race, sinking or swimming. It is an incredibly harsh, metallic, violent lexicon.
It really is when you put it all together.
Now, if it's true that our language shapes our psychological reality, what would a completely new vocabulary for a healthy work culture even sound like?
That's the real question.
If you were to invent a brand new idiom today, a phrase to describe a career that you actually love, one that generates energy rather than draining it, one that makes your biology look forward to Monday morning, what would that phrase be? Imagine making a mistake so catastrophic that it completely tanks your company's stock by 20%.
Oh yeah, a total disaster.
Right. Like you destroy thousands of jobs, you obliterate shareholder value, and you essentially force a furious board of directors to publicly fire you in absolute disgrace.
I mean, it's the ultimate nightmare scenario.
It is. But here's the crazy part. Your punishment for this monumental failure, you are handed a legally binding check for $10 million, escorted to a private car, and basically told to have a nice life.
Yep, it's wild.
Welcome to the upside down, completely counterintuitive rules of the modern corporate survival ecosystem. I'm so glad you could join us for this deep dive.
Thanks for having me. And, it's an ecosystem that operates on a completely different frequency than the one we're all taught in business school.
Oh, absolutely.
I mean, when you study business or even when you just learn the professional vocabulary of a language, you're basically just learning textbook grammar.
Right, like how to write a polite email.
Exactly. You memorize how to read a P&L statement or how to synergize with a team. But that textbook fluency is practically useless when you're suddenly dropped into a real boardroom.
Because the actual language being spoken there is, well, it's one of unspoken power dynamics. Raw survival, risk displacement.
Yeah, the real game being played beneath the surface.
Which is exactly the mission of our deep dive today. We're looking at a very specific curriculum. It's essentially a masterclass in C2 level, native-sounding English vocabulary and idioms.
But, and this is crucial, we are absolutely not treating this like some dry linguistics lesson.
No, not at all. We are treating this as a high-stakes translation guide for you, the listener.
Right, because the phrases we're unpacking today, like the idioms that native executives throw around in casual conversation, they're actually the psychological blueprints of the American corporate hierarchy.
They really are. They're the tools you need to accurately map a territory that is, frankly, often confusing, highly unwritten, and, let's be honest, occasionally incredibly toxic.
Yeah, and having that map is essential because for the vast majority of people listening right now, simply walking away from that territory just isn't a viable option.
I mean, we all entertain that romantic, escapist fantasy.
Oh, of course. You have a terrible day at the office and you instantly daydream about marching up to the executive suite, slamming a resignation letter on the desk.
Yes, and moving to a cabin in Vermont to roast artisanal coffee beans.
Exactly. It sounds so peaceful. No quarterly projections, no performance reviews, just, the smell of espresso and pine trees.
But then the pragmatic reality hits you like a freight train.
Right. You have a mortgage.
You have health insurance premiums. You have a family that relies on your income. That beautiful Vermont fantasy requires a massive financial safety net that, honestly, most of the workforce simply doesn't possess.
Yeah. Escaping the daily grind is a luxury. It's not an immediate strategy.
Which means you are forced into adaptation.
Exactly. You are left with a binary choice. You either learn to decode the environment or you allow the environment to consume you.
Right. Whether you're currently sitting in a highly aggressive, cutthroat corporate division, or you're just trying to make sense of the passive-aggressive undercurrents in a small marketing firm.
Surviving requires a really nuanced set of linguistic and social skills. You have to understand what is actually happening when a manager uses a specific phrase.
Because if you can't diagnose the ecosystem, you can't protect yourself within it.
Exactly.
So let's start building that map right now. And let's start by walking straight onto the invisible battlefield that underpins every single corporate structure on Earth. we need to talk about office politics.
Oh man, office politics. I mean, it is basically the dark matter of the corporate universe.
That's a great way to put it.
It makes up the vast majority of the actual mass and like the gravitational pull of an organization. But it's entirely invisible on the official organizational chart.
You can't just point to it.
No, you can't. It encompasses all the complex, deeply covert strategies, the whispered alliances.
The subtle manipulations.
Yeah, the things individuals use to secure resources, gain an advantage, or consolidate power.
And the most dangerous trap you can fall into, and this is a reality check for anyone listening who prides themselves on just keeping their head down and doing good work, is believing that you can opt out.
Oh, that's so common.
I hear people say this all the time. They're like, oh, I don't get involved in office politics. I just focus on my deliverables.
Right.
But being oblivious to the political game doesn't excuse you from it, does it?
No, not at all. It just turns you into a pawn. It makes you the most vulnerable entity on the board.
Wow.
I mean, you cannot protect yourself from a game you refuse to acknowledge is being played.
That makes sense.
If you're entirely focused on your spreadsheet while the people around you are focused on, securing leverage, you will eventually find yourself entirely outmaneuvered.
And you won't even realize the game had started.
Yeah.
And that obliviousness leads directly to one of the most ruthless, visceral idioms in the corporate dictionary. If you are wandering around that battlefield blindfolded, you are incredibly likely to be thrown under the bus.
Yeah, to throw someone under the bus, it's a quintessential phrase.
It perfectly encapsulates the violent suddenness of corporate self-preservation.
It really does. It means to intentionally sacrifice a colleague, right? To blame them for a mistake or a failure.
Specifically to protect your own reputation.
Or to avoid punishment, yeah.
Think about the mechanics of how this actually plays out in a high-stakes environment. Let's say your division is racing toward a massive project deadline. Millions of dollars are on the line.
Okay, setting the scene.
The deadline comes and goes. The launch is a total disaster. And you're pulled into a windowless conference room with the executive team for a postmortem.
The dreaded postmortem meeting.
Exactly. So the project manager, the person whose literal job title is to manage the timeline, is sweating. The executives are demanding answers. And instead of owning the delay, the project manager pivots smoothly, looks at the VP, and says, well, we were completely bottlenecked by the late delivery of the data analysis. And they look directly at you.
Ouch.
In 3 seconds, they have completely covered up their own mismanagement by serving you up to the executives.
In that moment, the project manager has basically calculated the trajectory of the threat, and they've physically pushed you into the road to absorb the impact.
Just sheer, unadulterated self-interest.
Exactly.
But wait, let me push back on this a little. If modern corporations are supposedly built on these, monolithic foundations of synergy and collaborative culture, stuff that's plastered on every motivational poster in the break room, isn't throwing a colleague under the bus a massive career-ending liability?
You'd think so, right?
Like if I'm a VP watching a project manager blame the data analyst, shouldn't I immediately recognize that as the ultimate betrayal of professional trust? It sounds less like collaboration and more like a hyper-aggressive game of musical chairs where someone is maliciously kicking the chair away.
Well, in a rational, perfectly ethical vacuum, yes, it would be viewed as a liability.
But we aren't in a vacuum.
Right. You have to look at the game theory driving the behavior. In a cutthroat corporate environment, job security is often tied to the perception of flawless execution.
Perception being the key word.
Exactly. The pressure is immense. And resources like bonuses, promotions, or even just keeping your job during a round of layoffs are fundamentally zero-sum.
So if someone else wins, you lose.
Yeah. So when a crisis hits, the biological fight-or-flight response activates. The logical part of the brain that cares about long-term collaborative synergy, it just shuts down.
And the primal instinct for immediate survival takes over.
Exactly.
So it's basically an opportunistic transfer of risk. They look at the impending consequence, they calculate the blast radius, and they decide that it is far better for your career to take the shrapnel than for theirs.
Precisely. And, the truly insidious part is that this behavior doesn't just happen in isolation.
What do you mean?
It's cultivated by a specific type of ecosystem. Like, a project manager only throws a data analyst under the bus if they fundamentally believe that the executive team values scapegoats over systemic solutions.
Wow, so the management is actually enabling it.
Oh, absolutely. Cutthroat behavior is frequently enabled and actively exacerbated by management teams who cultivate an illusion of psychological safety while actually rewarding the exact opposite.
And that illusion brings us to a foundational concept in understanding corporate hypocrisy. It's the gap between what management says and what management does.
Right.
Captured perfectly by the idiom paying lip service.
Yes, to pay lip service, which means to publicly express support, agreement, or, allegiance to an idea or a policy.
But doing absolutely nothing to actually support it.
Right, simultaneously taking absolutely zero meaningful action to back it up. It is the ultimate performative gesture.
It provides the optics of virtue without the expense of execution.
Exactly.
And the psychological dissonance this creates for employees is just staggering. Let's look at the classic human resources scenario.
Okay, let's hear it.
HR releases a beautifully formatted, multi-page memo. It's filled with modern buzzwords about prioritizing mental health, fostering work-life balance, and encouraging employees to set firm boundaries.
They might even throw in, a mandatory yoga seminar.
Totally. So, taking them at their word, you log off at exactly 5:00 p.m. on a Tuesday to go have dinner with your family.
Which is a completely reasonable action based on their stated policy.
Exactly. But the next morning, your direct manager pulls you into a one-on-one meeting and aggressively reprimands you for lacking dedication. They demand to know why you weren't monitoring the team's Slack channel at 7:30 p.m.
Yep. The memo was just paying lip service.
The company wants the positive branding of being a wellness-focused employer to attract talent. But the actual lived culture of the organization demands round-the-clock subservience.
Because the cost of true wellness is high. Hiring more staff to distribute the workload, extending project timelines, reducing output expectations, that is financially expensive.
But paying lip service is free.
Exactly. It's free.
Yeah.
And we see this replicated on a massive global scale, especially regarding environmental sustainability.
Oh, corporate greenwashing. It's everywhere.
It really is.
You see a massive logistics conglomerate launch a multi-million-dollar PR campaign. Their logo turns green, they run commercials featuring pristine oceans, and they talk endlessly about their commitment to reducing their carbon footprint.
Right.
But if you actually look at their supply chain, they are still utilizing massive unchecked amounts of single-use plastics. They're relying on the cheapest, most polluting shipping methods available.
Because, honestly, restructuring a global supply chain to be genuinely sustainable would just devastate their quarterly profit margin.
So they pay lip service to the environment.
Yeah, they buy the PR optics to placate consumers and regulators while entirely avoiding the difficult, expensive operational changes.
And it creates a profound cynicism within the workforce, doesn't it?
Oh, massive cynicism. When employees realize that the official communications of the company are fundamentally hollow, trust just evaporates.
And when trust evaporates, management often panics. They tighten their grip. Which leads us to arguably the most universally despised psychological toll in the modern workplace: micromanagement.
Ugh. Micromanagement. It is an organizational pathology.
Pathology is the perfect word for it.
It's an excessive, obsessive need for control over every minor detail of an employee's work process rather than focusing on the overall outcome.
The suffocating reality of this is really hard to overstate. It's the boss who requires you to draft an email, send it to them for approval, wait 3 hours for them to tweak 2 adjectives, and then finally give you permission to hit send.
Yes. Or the manager who demands a detailed hour-by-hour breakdown of how you spent your Tuesday.
Or who insists on being CC'd on every single piece of internal correspondence.
It is the absolute death of autonomy. And if we analyze the root cause, micromanagement rarely stems from a desire to just be malicious.
Really. It feels pretty malicious when you're the one dealing with it.
It feels that way, sure, but it almost always stems from the manager's own profound anxiety.
Okay, that makes sense.
They're insecure about their own standing. They probably lack proper leadership training, so they displace their anxiety by aggressively controlling the environment beneath them.
They confuse frantic activity and constant monitoring with actual productivity.
Exactly.
Let's frame this with a modern analogy. Being micromanaged is exactly like trying to work on a computer where the operating system is running a massive, intensive background diagnostic check every 3 seconds.
Oh, I like that.
Right. The diagnostic scan is taking up 99% of the CPU processing power. There is absolutely no RAM left to run the actual software, to open a document, or to do any creative problem solving.
That's spot on.
The system is so obsessed with checking itself that it paralyzes its own functionality.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize the physiological toll it takes on a human being. Because when you're micromanaged, your brain is constantly flooded with a low-level drip of cortisol.
You're just stressed all the time.
Yeah, you're in a state of perpetual vigilance. The psychological signal being broadcast to you every single day is, I do not trust you. I do not believe in your competence. You are incapable of making a decision without my intervention.
Which completely vaporizes any intrinsic motivation. Like, why would you ever take the initiative to solve a problem creatively if you know that your solution is just going to be aggressively redlined and dismantled by a manager who needs to justify their own existence?
You wouldn't. You learned helplessness. But here's where the systemic failure really reaches its peak.
Oh.
The micromanager is so intensely focused on the formatting of the spreadsheet, the font size, the cell colors, that they actively prevent their employees from making any actual progress.
Right. By hoarding all the processing power, to use that analogy, they guarantee that the division's output will be sluggish and mediocre.
Exactly. And that creates a truly cruel catch-22 for the employee.
Because on a daily basis, you're suffocated and physically prevented from doing deep, meaningful work.
Yeah.
But when December rolls around and you're sitting in your annual performance review, that exact same micromanager is going to evaluate your worth entirely on your ability to have generated massive measurable impact for the company.
Right. You are denied the autonomy to work, yet you're fiercely penalized for failing to produce extraordinary results. It's an impossible equation.
It really is. And this directly plunges us into the performative tightrope that every ambitious professional is forced to walk.
The tightrope. Yeah.
You are expected to balance two entirely opposing, contradictory forces. On one side, you have the absolute demand for impact, encapsulated by the ultimate C-suite buzzword, moving the needle.
To move the needle. I mean, you'll hear this phrase in almost every quarterly all-hands meeting.
Oh, everywhere.
It implies generating a significant, highly measurable shift in a key performance indicator. It's about undeniable objective progress.
And the distinction between busy work and moving the needle is really critical. Let's say you're tasked with launching a new digital marketing campaign. You could spend 3 weeks agonizing over the minor stylistic details. You could debate the exact shade of blue for the banner ad, or whether to use a serif or sans serif font.
Right, getting lost in the weeds.
Exactly. But your CEO and the board of directors above them do not care about your font choices. They are operating on a macro level.
Yeah, the only question they have is, did this campaign move the needle on Q4 customer acquisition costs? Did it drive undeniable revenue?
They want to see the physical needle on the dial of the company's growth metrics twitch upward.
Exactly. The mandate is clear: innovate, disrupt, find new efficiencies, and create massive value.
Okay, so the mandate is aggressive innovation. But standing in direct, violent opposition to that is the second force on this tightrope.
Uh-oh.
You're simultaneously expected to flawlessly execute another idiom, to toe the company line.
Yes, to toe the company line. It's an expression rooted in strict conformity.
The complete opposite of disruption.
Right. It means to adhere rigorously to the official rules, the established ideologies, and the unspoken behavioral expectations of the organization.
And the critical, often painful caveat is that you must adhere to them even if you fundamentally privately disagree with them.
Yes. You have to play along.
Look at your own calendar this week, right? Think about how many hours are dedicated to actual needle-moving impact versus how many hours are spent in performative meetings just to show that you are towing the line.
It's a glaring paradox.
It is. How can an organization realistically demand that an employee move the needle, which by definition requires challenging the status quo, taking risks, and dismantling old processes, if that same employee is systematically penalized for independent thinking and forced to blindly conform to legacy systems?
I mean, that paradox is the engine of corporate burnout.
I believe it.
In highly bureaucratic, mature organizations, the stated desire for disruption is often entirely fictional.
Really?
Fictional. Yeah, because the system is designed to protect itself. Imagine you're sitting in a massive cross-departmental strategy meeting. A senior vice president stands up and presents a new, highly anticipated initiative.
Okay, I'm picturing it.
As they lay out the roadmap, you realize, based on your own hard data and market analysis, that this strategy is fundamentally flawed. It's using outdated assumptions, and it will absolutely not move the needle. In fact, it might hemorrhage capital.
Yikes. So logic dictates you raise your hand, present your data, and save the company millions, right?
Logic, yes. But office politics dictates the exact opposite.
Because if you publicly challenge the vice president, You are no longer towing the company line.
Exactly. You are immediately branded as disruptive, negative, or, not a culture fit. The bureaucratic inertia of the organization will crush you for threatening the hierarchy.
Wow.
So, to protect your livelihood, your mortgage, and your career trajectory, you make a calculated survival choice. You nod. You smile. You applaud the terrible strategy.
You consciously suppress your capacity for innovation in order to perform conformity.
It's a soul-crushing compromise, but it happens every day. You have to actively choose mediocrity to survive.
And navigating that exact moment, knowing when it is safe to push the boundaries and when you must absolutely fold and conform, requires a level of situational awareness that borders on telepathy.
It really does.
It requires the high-level social skill of reading the room.
Reading the room. It is perhaps the most vital form of emotional intelligence in the corporate arsenal.
What does that mean, practically speaking?
It's the ability to acutely observe, synthesize, and accurately interpret the underlying mood, the hidden power dynamics, and the invisible emotional currents of a setting before you utter a single word.
So it's not just looking around to see who is physically present.
No. It is running a real-time psychological diagnostic of the space. It's sensing the tension in the silence. It's noticing who the CEO looks at before they answer a question.
Right. It's recognizing that the official agenda on the whiteboard has absolutely nothing to do with the actual conversation happening beneath the surface.
Exactly. And the danger of lacking this skill is catastrophic.
Let's paint a picture of a total failure to read the room.
Okay.
You walk into an executive briefing on a Thursday afternoon. You just closed a minor deal, you have a fresh cup of coffee, and you're feeling incredibly optimistic.
Feeling good.
You decide this is the perfect moment to cheerfully ask the room if they can approve a 30% budget increase for the annual company holiday party. You want to pitch a better DJ and an open bar.
A seemingly harmless request in a vacuum.
Right. But what you failed to observe, what you entirely missed because you weren't reading the room, is that the CEO is sitting at the head of the table, rubbing their temples in visible exhaustion.
Oh, no.
And the chief financial officer is aggressively redlining a spreadsheet of mandatory company-wide budget cuts to prevent a round of layoffs.
The magnitude of that faux pas cannot be overstated. By cheerfully demanding an open bar while the executives are trying to save jobs, you haven't just made an awkward comment.
You've broadcast a profound lack of business acumen.
Exactly. Or imagine cracking a sarcastic joke about job security during a town hall meeting in the middle of a financial crisis.
Just absolute professional self-sabotage.
Failing to read the room in high-stakes environments signals to leadership that you are dangerous. It tells them that you lack the fundamental empathy and judgment required to be trusted with higher-level responsibility.
Or client relationships, or sensitive information.
Right. It can permanently stall your upward trajectory.
So the survival parameters are set. You must possess massive emotional intelligence. You must perfectly balance the demand to move the needle with the mandate to toe the company line.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
And you must navigate the political minefield without getting thrown under the bus by a micromanager paying lip service to your career development.
Like you said, an Olympic-level psychological feat.
But this is where the conversation takes a really fascinating inward turn.
Okay, let's go there.
What happens when you actually win? What happens when you master the game? You navigate the politics flawlessly. You deliver undeniable metrics. You get the promotion to senior director. You get the corner office, the massive salary. And instead of feeling victorious, you feel like an absolute fraud.
This is a profound shift from the external mechanics of the workplace to the internal neurobiology of the high achiever. We are entering the territory of imposter syndrome.
Imposter syndrome.
And it is vital to understand that imposter syndrome is not just a fleeting moment of self-doubt. It is a persistent structural distortion of reality.
Let's define this clearly, because the term gets thrown around a lot on social media as a catch-all for just being a little nervous.
Yeah, people misuse it all the time. In a clinical and corporate context, imposter syndrome is a psychological phenomenon where an individual, despite possessing overwhelming, objective, undeniable external evidence of their competence, entirely fails to internalize their success.
They just can't accept it.
Right. They possess stellar resumes, they have track records of moving the needle, they receive accolades, yet they harbor a deeply entrenched delusion that they are secretly incompetent.
They attribute their success to sheer luck.
Or to a clerical error in HR, or to being in the right place at the right time, or to simply having successfully conformed and fooled everyone around them.
They are living in a state of perpetual dread, just waiting for the illusion to shatter.
Sure.
They are convinced that any day now, an executive is going to walk into their office with a clipboard, look at them and say, "We audited your files, we figured it out. You actually have no idea what you are doing, and we want the money back."
It's like the inverse of the Dunning-Kruger effect. Instead of an incompetent person being falsely confident, it's a highly competent person being paralyzed by their hyper-awareness of what they do not know.
There is a brilliant archetype that illustrates the irrationality of this. Think about a student who graduates at the absolute top of their class at Harvard Law School.
Okay, best of the best.
Right. They have been vetted, tested, and validated by one of the most ruthless academic filters on the planet. They're objectively brilliant.
Absolutely.
But during their first 6 months as a junior associate at a prestigious law firm, they are paralyzed by imposter syndrome. They sit in strategy meetings, terrified to open their mouth, entirely convinced that every other lawyer in the room is inherently smarter, faster, and more capable than they are.
Well, the reference group shifts. When you're suddenly surrounded by other brilliant people, your baseline for what is normal recalibrates.
That makes total sense.
And the danger of imposter syndrome in the corporate ecosystem is not just that it induces anxiety.
What's the real danger then?
The real danger is that it has devastating, tangible financial consequences. It actively prevents brilliant professionals from executing a critical survival mechanism, advocating for themselves.
Advocating for oneself. Now, this sounds like an HR buzzword, but the actual mechanics of it are incredibly aggressive, aren't they?
Oh, yeah. Very aggressive.
What does it actually mean to advocate for yourself in a corporate structure?
It means to actively, vocally, and unapologetically assert your value. It means establishing firm boundaries against exploitation.
And aggressively demanding your financial worth based on the data of your performance.
Exactly. It's the act of walking into a negotiation, sliding a portfolio of your metrics across the table and saying, here is exactly how I moved the needle this year, and here is the compensation I expect in return.
But if you're drowning in imposter syndrome, that conversation is physically impossible.
Entirely impossible.
If you genuinely believe that you're a fraud who is incredibly lucky to simply not be fired, you will never walk into a room and demand a 20% raise.
No, you'll accept whatever scraps the company offers you simply out of relief that they haven't discovered your secret.
Imposter syndrome disarms you before you even reach the negotiating table.
Exactly.
I want to pause here and deliver a very blunt reality check to you, the listener. Because there is a lingering myth that if you just put your head down, do brilliant work, and be a good employee, the system will eventually notice and reward you.
That is a very dangerous myth.
But the reality is, if you do not meticulously gather your performance data, if you don't present the hard, undeniable numbers proving exactly how your specific labor-generated profit for the company, you are effectively invisible.
Completely invisible.
No corporation on the planet is going to act like a benevolent, omniscient parent. They are not monitoring your quiet competence and deciding, out of the goodness of their corporate heart, to voluntarily hand you a promotion and a massive salary bump.
That is a fundamental truth of the ecosystem. A corporation is an entity designed to maximize profit and minimize labor costs. Period.
It is not fundamentally designed to dispense justice or reward quiet competence.
No. The system inherently rewards those who actively force it to recognize their value. If you want a promotion, if you want a substantial raise, you must overcome your inner critic, compile your leverage, and aggressively negotiate.
You can't wait to be noticed.
Yep.
You must demand to be compensated. You have to speak the language of leverage.
Because if you don't advocate for yourself, you're leaving massive amounts of capital on the table, and you're allowing the company to extract your value at a discount.
And the necessity of fighting for every single dollar, the sheer exhaustion of having to constantly prove your worth at the mid-level, it becomes incredibly stark and honestly deeply infuriating when you look at the architecture at the absolute top of the corporate ladder.
Oh, the top is a whole other world.
Because once you reach the C-suite, the fundamental laws of gravity regarding success and failure entirely invert.
The rules completely change. We are talking about the realm of massive structural inequality.
Which is perfectly summarized by a phrase that sounds like a luxury item, but is actually a mechanism of extreme risk mitigation. The golden parachute.
The golden parachute. It is a brilliant, evocative idiom.
A parachute is designed to save you from a catastrophic fall, right?
Right. And a golden parachute ensures that even when you plummet from the sky, you land on a bed of cash.
Let's define the mechanics of this. A golden parachute is a highly lucrative, legally binding financial compensation package. often including millions in cash, stock options, and ongoing benefits. That is contractually guaranteed to a top executive upon their departure from the company.
But the most crucial part of this definition is what triggers the parachute.
It isn't just for a happy retirement, is it?
No. It is triggered if the executive is dismissed, if they are forced out by the board of directors, or if the company is acquired in a hostile takeover and their position is eliminated.
It is an insurance policy against failure and displacement.
Precisely.
To really grasp the magnitude of this disparity, we have to contrast it with the reality of the average worker. Let's look at a mid-level manager.
Okay, let's compare.
Let's say this manager makes a significant strategic error. Or perhaps the company just misses its quarterly earnings and decides to implement a massive reduction in force to appease Wall Street.
Pretty common scenario.
That mid-level manager is called into a 5-minute Zoom meeting with HR. Their network access is simultaneously cut off, and they are laid off.
Brutal, but true.
If they are incredibly lucky, they might receive a meager severance package, perhaps 2 weeks of pay for every year of service. They are left holding a cardboard box of desk items, staring down the barrel of an aggressive job market, terrified of how they will pay their rent next month.
That is the standard unforgiving reality of corporate at-will employment for 99% of the workforce. The risk of failure or economic downturn is borne entirely by the employee.
But then you look at the architecture of the C-suite. A CEO making tens of millions of dollars a year could completely mismanage a historic corporation.
They could ignore market trends, make disastrous acquisitions, oversee massive scandals,
And drive the company's stock price straight into the abyss. They could destroy thousands of jobs.
and eventually the board of directors is forced to step in and demand their resignation to stop the bleeding.
So the CEO has objectively, catastrophically failed at their job. And yet, because of their contract, they will be handed a golden parachute worth 15, 20, sometimes $50 million as they are shown the door.
It functions almost entirely as a reward for incompetence.
But why? Why would a board agree to that?
Well, from an agency theory perspective, boards of directors offer these parachutes to incentivize executives to take necessary risks without fear of personal ruin.
Or to ensure that if the executive needs to be removed, they will leave quietly without launching a protracted, brand-damaging lawsuit.
Yeah. It's essentially a multi-million-dollar bribe to go away.
But the structural reality remains. It is a safety net so massive that it entirely removes all actual risk for the elite.
The executive gets unimaginably rich if they succeed, and they get incredibly rich if they fail.
It showcases a stark, undeniable caste system within the corporate ecosystem.
It really does.
The rules that govern the average worker revolve around ruthless accountability. The rules that govern the executives revolve around absolute risk immunity. So, this paints a rather intense, perhaps deeply cynical picture for you, the listener. You are expected to navigate the invisible, zero-sum game of office politics.
You have to constantly watch your back to avoid being thrown under the bus by micromanagers.
Micromanagers who pay lip service to your well-being while suffocating your autonomy.
Right. And you're walking a razor-thin tightrope, trying to read the room and toe the company line while battling your own imposter syndrome.
All within a system that demands you fight for every scrap of leverage, while it simultaneously rewards catastrophic failure at the top with golden parachutes.
It's a lot to process.
It begs a deeply pragmatic, urgent question. If this ladder is fundamentally rigged, and climbing higher simply means exposing yourself to more toxic politics and dealing with untouchable executives, what is the alternative?
How do you survive and grow if you refuse to play that specific upward mobility game?
Exactly.
This is where we shift from diagnosis to strategy. The source material highlights a brilliant alternative to the endless, exhausting upward climb.
Oh, this is the good part.
It is a maneuver that reclaims agency, and it's known as the lateral move.
The lateral move. Now, the geometry of that implies stepping sideways. What does that actually look like in practice?
A lateral move is a strategic career transition where you move to a new role or entirely shift to a different department within the organization, but you remain at the exact same hierarchical level.
Same title band, roughly the exact same salary.
Exactly. You are not taking a step up the ladder. You are stepping off your current ladder and onto a parallel one.
I can hear the highly ambitious listeners raising an eyebrow right now.
Oh, I'm sure.
To someone who is hyper-focused on growth, titles, and increasing their salary, moving completely sideways sounds incredibly counterintuitive. Doesn't a lateral move signal a lack of ambition? Doesn't it look like your career has stalled and you've given up on fighting for the promotion?
It might look that way to an outside observer whose entire identity is tied to an upward trajectory.
But internally,
Internally, for the individual executing it, a lateral move is often a masterclass in long-term career strategy. You have to detach your ego from the title and look at the functional, immediate benefits of the maneuver.
unpack the strategy for us. Why choose sideways over upward?
Let's apply it to the ecosystem we just mapped out. Imagine you are trapped in a siloed department under a severe micromanager who is destroying your mental health and actively preventing you from moving the needle.
A horrible place to be.
Or perhaps you're in a department, say a specialized branch of sales, where you have realized there's a fundamental ceiling to your growth and the politics above you are incredibly toxic.
Right.
A lateral move is your immediate escape hatch. It allows you to instantly exit a toxic microenvironment or a dead-end vertical without having to undergo the massive disruption of leaving the company entirely.
You keep your tenure, you keep your unvested stock options, you keep your institutional knowledge, but you immediately change your daily reality.
Exactly. It's a strategic repositioning on the chessboard. You are getting out of the line of fire.
Furthermore, it allows for massive neuroplasticity and skill expansion, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. Let's say you move laterally from marketing into human resources or from engineering into product management.
You're suddenly exposed to an entirely new set of problems, new vocabularies, and new workflows.
You're expanding your macro understanding of how the entire business functions.
You're building a wider foundation.
Precisely. You are finding better long-term growth potential, networking with new leadership who might actually recognize your value, and acquiring a diverse skill set that makes you incredibly valuable in the long run.
And you're doing all of this without taking on the immediate crushing pressure and political crosshairs of an executive promotion before you're fully ready to engage in that specific warfare.
It's about playing the long game. It's recognizing that sometimes to eventually move up efficiently and safely, you first have to move sideways to find a ladder that isn't actively rotting.
That is an incredibly empowering perspective. It shifts the power dynamic. It's about taking control of your environment rather than just blindly, stubbornly pushing upward into a toxic ceiling.
Exactly.
Well, we have covered an immense amount of ground today. We have thoroughly decoded the hidden survival language of the modern workplace. Let's pull the lens back and recap this journey for the listener.
Let's do it.
We started by mapping out the invisible architecture of power office politics. We looked at the zero-sum survival instinct that causes colleagues to ruthlessly throw each other under the bus.
And we dismantled the cognitive dissonance of management teams who pay empty lip service to corporate culture while simultaneously suffocating their employees' autonomy through the pathological anxiety of micromanagement.
We examined the exhausting performative tightrope, the absolute paradox of being demanded to move the needle and innovate while simultaneously being forced to blindly toe the company line and conform.
We discussed the high-stakes emotional intelligence required to accurately read the room and sense the invisible currents of power.
And then we looked inward, exploring the distorting reality of imposter syndrome and how that internal critic actively prevents us from doing the aggressive, necessary work of advocating for ourselves and demanding our worth.
Finally, we looked at the massive structural disparities at the top, the golden parachutes that reward executive failure, and we provided a strategic sideways escape hatch in the form of the lateral move.
We have essentially equipped you, the listener, with the C2 level vocabulary and the psychological frameworks required not just to sound like a native executive, but to accurately diagnose the reality of your own workplace environment.
And possessing that vocabulary is only the beginning. The true value of this deep dive lies in application. We strongly encourage you, the listener, to actively utilize these frameworks rather than just passively digesting them as theory.
Tomorrow, when you log into your morning meetings or walk onto the office floor, we challenge you to actively observe your own corporate ecosystem through this new, highly critical lens.
Listen carefully to the cadence of the executives. Identify who is genuinely executing a vision and who is simply paying lip service to secure optics.
Pay attention to the physical and emotional dynamics in your strategy meetings. Practice actively reading the room, sensing the tensions, before you decide to speak.
And most importantly, turn the lens inward and analyze your own trajectory. Look at the hard data of your performance. Recognize where you might be letting imposter syndrome paralyze your negotiations, and identify exactly where you need to start aggressively advocating for yourself.
Or perhaps realize it is time to detach your ego from the upward climb and plot a strategic lateral move to save your sanity.
Yes. Observe the ecosystem. Map the territory.
But as you do, we wanted to leave you with one final, deeply philosophical and perhaps slightly provocative thought to ponder on your own time.
Okay, hit us.
We have spent this entire deep dive giving you the precise vocabulary to map out the toxic traits, the covert power dynamics, and the ruthless strategies of the corporate world so that you can navigate it safely. We have given you the survival language to keep from getting eaten in the jungle.
Right.
But here is something to really mull over. If you become an absolute master at reading the room, if you perfect the performative art of towing the company line, and if you learn to play the intricate, ruthless game of office politics flawlessly just to protect yourself and secure your leverage, at what point do you stop surviving the system and start becoming the very system you were trying to escape?
Wow. It is the ultimate risk of perfect adaptation. You risk losing the very values you were trying to protect.
It really is the ultimate paradox. So until next time, keep your eyes wide open, check the internal x-rays of your own corporate environment, and never stop questioning the true meaning of the language being spoken around you.